All right, everybody, welcome to BO Boys for Thursday, February 8th. Fuck it, it's a raw feed. We're doing it live. I'm Clayton.
Yeah, I'm Pat. Clayton, it is the big game weekend, and we had to bring in the greatest analysis there is. We had to bring in the big hitter. We had to bring in the man who sits at the head of the table when it comes to box office, our tribal chief. Scott Mendelson has joined us. Scott, thanks for joining us on the BO Boys.
It's always a pleasure. Happy to be here. I'm going to close this box and hope that nothing weird happens.
All right. Well, you know what? And if something weird happens, it can be great radio. So whatever happens, it'll be great. So, Scott, obviously, we're going to get into this weekend. We want to hear from you about how box office has been unfolding these first few months first month of 2024. Look ahead a little bit. But before we get to that, you have started a Substack, which on this show, Clayton and I, we've been singing its praises. Must read, must subscribe, must pay for. You got to do it.
Must pay for.
Must pay for.
That's the key thing.
Yes. That is.
I don't give a shit if you read it. Just pay for it.
Yes. Yeah. So you would take pay and don't read over read it on the dark web and don't pay.
When you have children, you'll understand.
Yes. Well, Scott, tell the wanna BO boys, wanna BO girls, wanna BO people why they must pay for The Outside Scoop by Scott Mendelson.
Because it's my it's my job now. And if you, I mean, not to be bloviating or whatever, but if you liked what I did at Forbes, and I'm gonna say if you like what I do at the Wrap, because that was a little different anyway. But yeah, it's basically what I used to do. Eventually, I'm gonna start getting back in the habit of doing, more stories. So it's not just one epic poem about one story a day. I'm trying to figure out how to balance between covering all the things that I want to cover and not spamming my subscribers with 5 emails a day. Right. But work in progress. $5 a month, $50 for the year. So far it is going pretty well. I had my first sponsored post yesterday from the lovely people who put out Godzilla -1's Oscar campaign. So yay.
Yes. Oh, nice. So it's movie related. It wasn't like a vibrator company.
No, I'll take that too. Again, I got kids.
Yeah. You'll still Alpha Brain. It doesn't matter.
Yes, exactly. So yeah, it's I'm trying to publish at least once a day, and sometimes 1 or 2 more. Sometimes I end up, getting caught up in life just because whatever.
You got one. Yeah. Well, here's what I'll say. It's basically because so many of our listeners fell in love with box office from reading you on Forbes. That is such a gateway drug to a generation of box office enthusiasts. And this is that return to form. So I think if you love that,
I'm making the Oppenheimer face.
There he is.
That's
the
great.
Man who started it all. He created the bomb that led to the nightmare that is the BO Boys. So yes, The Outside Scoop, everyone must read, must pay for. And it's a return to form for the tribal chief, Scott Mendelson.
Hey, can I speak on this really quickly? Because I say this on the podcast every week that, in America, capitalist society, nobody's owed a living, right? I disagree in one case. I disagree here because, like Pat said, our listeners, if they cannot pay for Scott Mendelson's brilliance, right, then what are they paying for? Okay. You owe this man a living. If you're listening to this podcast, you owe him a living.
Yeah.
So you need to subscribe and pay. Okay. Yes. If you are a wanna BO boy, wanna BO girl, wanna BO person, you need to pay for this Substack.
Yes.
Period.
So the other question is, Scott, are people going to pay this weekend to see Lisa Frankenstein? That is the number that everyone wants to know when we get to Sunday night. The entire country is going to want to know the final score of Lisa Frankenstein's opening box office weekend. So how are you feeling as we head into big game Lisa Frankenstein weekend?
I'm sure the PVOD business will be great.
Wow.
Look, it's a fun movie. I enjoyed it. It's getting mixed reviews, which aren't going to help. It's tracking at like over under 6-7 million, and I would be pleasantly surprised if it gets higher than that.
Mm-hmm.
It is the kind of film that we all say that we want, and then we don't show up for in theaters. It is the kind of film that's going to be a future classic to a generation of young women, teens, girls, college-age kids, whatever.
Whatever.
And what I like about it is that it's very much indebted not just to Frankenstein, but to Tim Burton's Edward Scissorhands, which itself is very much a Frankenstein type story. But it doesn't wear its homages on its sleeve to the point where it needs references and recognition of the Burton film to exist. It's its own thing. It's a ripoff, don't remake, and it's going to inspire a fan base of people that have never even heard of Edward Scissorhands, and that is good.
Mm-hmm.
And it's a fun film. It's you could take this as a compliment, I guess. I'm shocked that I got a PG-13.
Okay, I like hearing that it should have gotten an R. That's intriguing.
Well, I mean, whatever. I mean, I take my kids were interested, I take them.
Mm-hmm.
But
Mm-hmm.
I'm saying, if your kids can handle, whatever.
Yeah.
I was refreshingly surprised that the MPA was a little bit lenient this time out. Good for them.
Now, Scott, this usually would be a great counter programming to The Big Game, right? Because it is a movie that will be driven by female moviegoers. Unfortunately, this is the Taylor Swift Bowl. That is what this is, and that is where the young ladies are going to be training all their attention. Now, when you were putting this movie, when you thought as a studio you're putting this movie out, this is the worst case scenario for this movie, right? To have this happen.
This is the second time that Universal or Comcast, this is a Focus Features film, has been kneecapped by Taylor Swift. Because they were going to open The Exorcist the Believer on Friday the 13th in October. And then in early September, Taylor Swift came out of nowhere and said, hey, we made a movie based on my concert tour. AMC is self-distributing. We're dropping it on Friday the 13th or Thursday the 12th, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
And so, understandably, Universal said, shit, and moved The Exorcist to October 6th. And and maybe this is just a matter of Universal / Focus Features being among the more committed old school theatrical distribution house that they're the ones that tend to get burned when stuff like this happens.
Mm-hmm.
The Fabelmans was the movie that got screwed over the most when Netflix says, yes, we'll put out Knives Out 2 in theaters, but only over Thanksgiving weekend.
Right. Yeah, this is a situation where it's what we want in that at least there's product coming out. But it just doesn't seem to have anything going for it that's breaking through. Catherine Newton, star of this. She was great in Blockers. She was good in the Freaky Friday, Freaky movie. Freaky. Just freaky, of course. Good, but she's kind of a total unknown to the general public. I don't think there's any other element of this that really breaks through. I'll throw this out there. I don't think they really capitalized on it in the marketing, but this kind of is the year of the female Frankenstein, because you've got Barbie, which is kind of in some ways a female Frankenstein, but then Poor Things, which is big time a female Frankenstein. And I don't think this movie is riding that wave at all, but do you feel any part of that or see anything in the marketing they could capitalize to sort of just ride the wave of this is the year of female Frankenstein?
I'm always loath to blame the marketing because 9 times out of 10, it's a shoot the messenger type situation. That being said, I would argue there hasn't been a ton of conventional publicity, at least to the point that, how do I say this without being a jerk? I do believe there is a scenario where a film starring Catherine Newton, directed by Robin Williams' daughter, and written by the woman that penned Jennifer's Body, could have made a little bit of noise this weekend. I'm not talking big opening weekend, but I'm talking enough so we're not, explaining why a $6 million opening isn't that bad, really.
Right. Well, I mean, we'll get to our full-on predictions for the weekend, but do you feel like 6 million is starting to feel high based on the buzz this is going into? Like, I mean, Clayton, throw it out there. Do you think this will cry macho? Because you brought it up over a text to me today.
Well, that was Christopher. Wannabe senior intern Christopher invoked the cry macho. So let's give credit where credit is due.
Yep.
Yeah, I do think, and cry macho is in 4, like it's 4. So it's not a crazy low number. I mean, you threw out Playmobil, which is just pure lunatic speak.
Right.
How about this? Freaky, which came out in October of 2020, obvious handicaps going on. That did 3.5, which was what basically everything was opening to at that time, give or take.
Yeah. Right.
I mean, Jennifer's Body in 2009 only opened to 6.8. So, I mean, I think this movie could open lower than that because also at that time you had hot stars. You had a very hot writer. And so I do think that this, we didn't mention Cole Sprouse. Cole Sprouse is the Riverdale gentleman. He is in this film as well. So there is some, I guess, beefcake, if you will. The ladies might like Cole Sprouse. But again, I'm not seeing, like you were saying, any sort of conventional or unconventional promotion for this. I'm not seeing them sitting down and eating hot wings, obviously. I'm not seeing them tasting European snacks on Lad Bible. These things I'm not seeing. So those are the things where you could see the personalities of these people. I'm seeing more stuff about Mr. and Mrs. Smith and Amazon show than I'm seeing about this. So I do think, the promotion here, I like the trailers. I think it looked cute. It makes me want to see. Me and Pat are seeing this movie this weekend.
Yep.
But again, it's just not penetrating. It's not penetrating in any way. And that's where, you're going to have a problem.
Yeah.
I mean, if they could sell this movie more honestly, it's a shame they can't just say, Catherine Newton wears like 8 different goth outfits.
Perfect. I mean, yeah.
And depending on how you interpret that statement, either way, it is an appealing movie.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's a very, I mean, listen, that's a very 1990s way to sell a movie. That young rising starlet will be in various goth outfits. Obviously Winona Ryder made her bones on that kind of movie pitch back in the mid 90s. So yeah, it's going to be a tough weekend. It's really nothing is breaking through the Taylor Swift big game. That's all anyone wants to cover right now.
To be fair, while I was more optimistic, even at the beginning of the year, just because I expected a bit more aggressive marketing, but whatever, these things happen. Most of the films that we talk about as being these generational classics, especially, frankly, the ones aimed at women, Heather's, Jennifer's Body, they weren't all huge hits.
Right.
So, again, I think it will do very well on PVOD in terms of its budget and what it would need to do to make money.
Right.
It's just not good news for theaters.
Right. That's a bigger thing. Yeah, because 13 million, this movie will make 13 million plus over the course of its life several times over. It's just, not that many people are going to be buying Lisa Frankenstein commemorative popcorn buckets this week. Well, here's something else coming out this weekend, or not coming out, but 4 minutes extra of something that's been out. Anyone But You Valentine's edition. They're adding 4 minutes. Clayton and I have been talking about this the last a couple of weeks. Don't know what's in that 4 minutes. We're theorizing maybe it's hardcore sex. Who knows? We don't know.
It might be some actual plot and character development.
Wow.
Burn. That was a burn.
That was a burn.
I'm thrilled the movie's doing well. But that movie is the Wish of rom-coms. And by that, I mean, it has all the stereotypical ingredients that you associate with a super generic rom-com and doesn't cook any of them. Dermot Mulroney is bad. He's never bad. He's good in those VOD action movies he occasionally stars in.
But maybe this 4 minutes is 4 minutes of Dermot Mulroney just really, as the kids say, cooking up there. Cooking and eating up there. So who knows? That's. Do you think this 4 minutes holds enough intrigue that Anyone But You gets another bump this weekend, or is it going to be in the Taylor big game?
I think it's going to be Taylor, but they're also aiming for the actual Valentine's Day week, which is, it's a Wednesday or something.
Yep.
This
feels there's like a big Tuesday play. I think Tuesday then could be where Anyone But You, skyrockets up a couple of spots in the top 10.
Yeah, and it's what, an extra $50? I don't know.
Right.
But it's but I think it's as happy as I am for this film's success on principle. This only happens because it's December. I've seen a lot of people saying, "Oh, they should have held it till Valentine's Day." Yeah, if it opened in Valentine's Day, it would have done 2.5 times its 4-day weekend and been.
Yeah. I mean, I do think that the sleepiness of the box office really helped this thing. And listen, I liked it enough. I also agree that it was no great shakes. It didn't really blow me away. And there were things that I was missing. I thought the characters were inconsistent in a lot of the, from scene to scene. But there is something positive about a movie of this quality doing what it's doing just because it is what it is and it has who it has in it, right? So Sydney Sweeney making this sort of movie a hit is positive for the future, because what if she's in a great movie? That is then going to be huge.
Well, I'll let you know on Monday after about 1 p.m.
Oh, so we're talking MW. We won't say the full title, but okay. So Scott Mendelson. Wow. Yeah, I mean, it's going to be so interesting let's talk about Madam Web a little bit and Sydney Sweeney. After this Anyone But You performance, does Sydney Sweeney feel like, listen, not a full-on butts in the seats, she's a sure thing movie star, but she seems like she's on that path coming off a movie like this. Do you think she means anything to Madam Web?
I think she's a mild added value element if everything else was in place. And frankly, that entire cast is stacked. The only reason the film isn't, well, there's a lot of reasons the film isn't tracking better. Glass Cliff, they waited to diversify until the comic book superhero movie genre basically imploded. It's this weird, disconnected. Technically, it's a Spider-Man prequel, but not really. And really, it looks more like the Butterfly Effect, and that's fine. I like the Butterfly Effect. But it's got this ridiculous cast. And again, not having seen the movie, I'm sort of very confused why there wasn't at least a second trailer that offered more conventional superhero tropes in it.
Yeah, that trailer was very difficult to understand, and they never did release something that would clarify it, or at least choose a lane that we could all sort of follow. Like one character that we could follow as to what is this movie possibly about? Because you have a character that is dressed like Spider-Man in black, but he's not Venom, and he's doing Spider-Man stuff, but you never explain that he is not Spider-Man. And I think, is that to fool people into thinking Spider-Man's in this movie? I don't know. It's just needlessly confusing.
Yeah, there are 3 different times in the trailer. A trailer is less than 2 minutes where a character says, I don't understand that. Some version of a character in the trailer voicing the complexity and the fact that they can't understand what the movie is about. That is not great marketing. I know you don't want to blame the marketing, but
generally no. This is, it's one of the worst trailers I've ever seen for a mainstream release.
Yeah.
In terms of construction and editing and simple narrative coherency.
Yeah. Yeah.
And we'll find out soon enough what it does or doesn't have up its sleeve. I do think I do think it's a huge sea change that we're talking about Sydney Sweeney, who just scored in a $25 million R-rated romantic comedy. And we're talking about, we hope the big role she has in a Marvel superhero film doesn't hurt her career too much.
Yeah. I mean, there's a good chance. Let's throw it on the line now. Do you think Madam Web domestically, when all said and done, makes more than Anyone But You? I mean, Anyone But You is what? It's 70 something good. Now. Could have hit 80.
If it's surprisingly good, sure. Otherwise, no.
Wow. That is a sea change. Who would have thought that when those two movies were greenlit? Was there anyone who thought that Madam Web would make less than Anyone But You?
Who would have thought that Wonka would make, Five Nights at Freddy's would make more domestically than the Marvels?
Yeah.
Yeah. What and I know you mentioned Wonka. We are going to do an episode where we divvy up the millions, one of our signature segments that we do here. But I just don't think we're giving enough credit and talking about Wonka enough, going over $200 million domestic. I mean, what would you point to here? Is it a combination of factors? Is it Chalamet plus a kids movie plus this great director? Would you say that is the formula? Or how much would you give Chalamet? How much credit do you give his stardom, which is only going to get bigger after Dune 2?
Big added value element. And I think it's funny because, I mean, I've been dissing the film's prospects since it was greenlit in late 2016.
Mm-hmm.
But back in 2016, I think it would have flopped.
Mm-hmm.
Because for one thing, nobody knew, Shyamalan was a non-entity back then.
Mhm.
I do think there is credit due to him as a butts and seats draw, as a marquee character that suits his persona in a skewed way. I mean, and I say this is not derogatory. He is a twink. And they cast him as a wilf,
Mm-hmm.
and that is as good a reason as any for people to show up. It's an original musical. And again, everyone likes to pretend that nobody likes musicals, which is bullshit. If you make one that works to audiences, they will show up almost every time. And the novel, the source material was popular enough, and the film was cheap enough. It was only $125 to where it didn't have to break records to break even. But more importantly, because it was not an insanely expensive movie, it had room to breathe. It wasn't nonstop spectacle all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And it is, and again, I have my issues with the film just as a movie. It didn't do much for me, but I think it did a number of things correct, which is that it's not a setup for a sequel. It's a one and done. I mean, could there be a sequel? Sure.
Right.
But it didn't end on a giant cliffhanger with a bunch of Easter eggs.
Right.
They don't make Wonka into a superhero or a chosen one.
Mm-hmm.
He's just a guy trying to make a living making chocolates.
Right. Right.
And yes, it is a prequel origin story, blah, blah, blah. But it doesn't wait to the last 5 minutes to show Willy Wonka is the Willy Wonka. In the first scene in the movie, he's Willy Wonka in the costume that you expect him to be in, singing about chocolate.
Yes. There's a version of this movie where he doesn't even make chocolate until the last 5 minutes of the movie.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the fact that they did not go that route shows that they're learning.
Yes. Yes. Where it's like for 2 hours, they're teasing chocolate. He almost buys a chocolate bar at some point.
Christ.
Yeah. No, there is a version of that. So they made the right movie. Back to Chalamet and back to Sydney Sweeney and back to possible butts in the seat star power that's being developed now. We had the great Kirk Minahan of the Kirk Minahan show on, and we were talking about stars that could play lawyers and make money at the box office playing a lawyer. Because, I mean, the 90s, that was the test of stardom. Could you play a lawyer in a movie that maybe had one punch in the whole movie? And that movie made, $80 to $120 million domestic. So Chalamet, Sydney Sweeney, Austin Butler, I'll throw in Tom Holland, and I'll throw in Glenn Powell. Do you see stars in that group? Who do you get into a lawyer suit and they could make a movie that gets you 75 million plus domestically?
I'm going to throw, and you can throw in anybody you think.
All
and I
in
also
the
am going
same
to say Zendaya.
Zendaya. Okay, wait. So Scott, could you repeat that there?
I think all of them, but they have to be more or less in the same movie.
Okay. Interesting. Okay, so you're like, it has to be a stacked cast.
Yes.
Well, I mean, is there a version of, two of them? Again, whether it's you team up Sydney Sweeney with Chalamet and they're in a, John Grisham or modern John Grisham adaptation.
But what about like a Legal Eagles remake or something where you would
Right.
have
That is
yeah.
that's sort of like a go-to example of the kind of movies we used to make. But here's the funny thing: it's not very good. I recently rewatched it, and
Mhm.
it wasn't that big of a hit even 40 years ago.
No, it
Huh.
wasn't. Yeah.
But no, I absolutely get what you're talking about, and I do think that combination would be winning because Chalamet as this. I mispronounced his name. I apologize. He has a quirky persona. He's not like a gruff, conventional, very serious leading man.
Mhm.
So watching him try to seduce Sydney Sweeney would be entertaining.
Right. Right.
And yeah, I think the two of them, maybe one or two others in a supporting role as an evil lawyer or something. I don't know.
Mhm.
They're all wearing suits the whole time, especially Sweeney.
Mhm.
Glasses optional, glasses mandatory. Yes,
Okay.
I do
There we
think
go.
there is some commercial value if you don't spend a fortune making it, and if you sell it to the TikTok crowd. And I don't say that derisively.
Mhm.
I do think, and I don't want to give credit to every hit movie to TikTok because I don't remotely think that's the case.
Mhm.
But I do think the platform is becoming a supplement in terms of creating awareness among people that don't read newspapers, don't watch regular television, and don't see a bunch of non-tentpole movies in theaters. Because you take those away, where do you see trailers? Where do you see TV spots? Where do you see posters?
Mhm.
And that's a
Mhm.
problem that non-tentpole movies have had theatrically for the last 6 or 7 or 8 years.
Right. Right.
Um,
Yeah, and Chalamet gets there. He gets himself on TikTok. Sydney Sweeney gets herself on TikTok. I'm not so sure Glenn Powell, how much
wait,
Glenn Powell gets
Jenna
himself.
Ortega is the evil lawyer.
Well,
Oh
there you
yeah.
go.
So I think here's what this movie is, right? So
Yep.
I mean, this is going to be akin
She
to one of
tries to
those.
seduce him. Inexplicably, she fails, but
Yep.
Yeah. So
That's it.
this has to be a sort of Brat Pack type movie, right?
yes.
Where these are all young hotshot lawyers. You play up the fact that they are all super stylish. So there used to be, back in the day when movies were you would have whole fashion trends like urban cowboy. People started dressing like cowboys in the city because of urban cowboy. You have to do this as lawyer chic. These characters are stylish lawyers. They all have their different styles. You can tell their character from their style, and kids start dressing like lawyers. This movie would be huge if you get Zendaya, if you get Jenna Ortega, if you get Austin Butler, if you get Timothy Chalamet, if you get Sydney Sweeney. I mean, what's the budget on this movie because of that cast? But still,
I think
I mean,
there's a version where there's like 3 of them in the same movie.
but
I
but
think
yeah, so
past
pick
that,
him out of
yeah.
a hat. But I mean, that is,
Yeah.
I think, something that
Dude.
becomes beyond
At
just
least
a movie.
3.
Yeah.
You need a marquee director.
Yes.
Mhm.
You need the promise of escapism, which basically it suits but a movie and more action.
Yes.
I mean, there's the IP almost.
Yeah.
It suits the movie, but none of the cast of the TV show
Yeah.
suits because they're
Yeah,
TV
yeah, yeah.
actors.
They're
But you
TV
get Jenny
actors.
Ortega, Sydney Sweeney, Timothy Chalamet. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, why do you think that show took off this summer? I mean, part of it's just because it happened to be on Netflix, and
Right.
people go, "Oh, what's on Netflix? Oh, that looks fun." But it's an old school, bubblegum sit. I don't want to say it's a sitcom, but it's certainly not a drama.
Right.
It's a
right.
light legal dramedy that's sexy as hell. It's dumb, but in a fun way. And there's 9 seasons worth, so you could binge it. And again, this stuff isn't rocket science.
Right.
And I do think, in terms of a broader, how do we save theatrical? I do think studios are going to have to spend a few years taking losses, rebuilding the star system,
Yes.
reacclimating, re-educating audiences to show up for a movie that looks fun, that stars people you like, just because it's a movie that looks fun with people you like.
Yes,
It's the
and
same
not
way,
because it's going to be part 7 of a 40-part series. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I think in the same way that, in the early 90s, the Cleveland Indians spent a few years, building up, taking a bunch of promising people from the minor leagues, and they built them up into solid ball players. And they had a couple crappy seasons, but eventually they had a playoff team.
Yes. Chalamet is Manny Ramirez, and Austin Butler is Albert Bell. Yeah, 100%. Yeah.
I mean, you have to trust the process.
Yeah. I mean,
There's a process.
do you think that, the superhero movies are on the wane, it's falling apart? That was a genre, and correct me if you think I'm wrong, but that was a genre that did not build stars. Chris Hemsworth is not a movie star because he played
Chrissy
Thor.
Hemme.
Chrissy Hemme is not a movie star because he played Thor. That is not a star making system. But anyone but you made Sydney Sweeney in a way that I can't think of any actress that came out of the superhero movies a bigger star. ScarJo was already a star that plays Black
she was
Widow
also already a name.
Right. But I can't think.
I mean, if anything, and this is where people whine about, MCU killed the movie star, and it's not just Marvel, but it's like we had a decade or so, 15 years maybe, where you could get Chris Hemsworth as Thor or Chris Pine as Captain Kirk, which meant that you just had Chris Hemsworth as just some guy or Chadwick Boseman as just some cop. It became lesser in the eyes of moviegoers.
Right. They were just like, this is just them killing time before they play the one character I care about.
Yes.
And I think that's why the Superman actors have always had a lot of trouble playing anything after Superman, because how do you beat Superman? Superman is strong. He flies. He can see through things. He's the buffest guy and the most handsome guy on the planet.
Right.
How do you play anything less than that?
Right. Such as playing Argyle.
Yeah. Well, I mean, that's, it's another classic. He's not actually a star. I mean, before Superman, he was making direct-to-DVD Bruce Willis action movies. After Justice League, he was making direct-to-DVD serial killer movies with Brent Kingsley. The Witcher saved his ass. And of course, and again, I don't want to assign motivation or armchair psychoanalyze or anything, but he apparently somehow convinced himself that he could walk away from The Witcher.
Yeah. Well, I mean, The Rock might have mesmerized him a little bit there.
How many franchises can The Rock destroy? The Fast Saga, DC Films, WWE.
Right here. Yes. This is something that let's just jump into it, because we were talking about this. I am now of the thought, and I have been of this thought since the beginning, and Pat can attest to this.
Yeah.
That I was always team Vin Diesel in this, because Vin Diesel does have his quirks, and yes, he is a diva, but he truly cared about this franchise and helped build this franchise, and he loves La Familia. And The Rock came in and did his diva behavior and was cancerous to these people and this franchise. And I'm saying Vin Diesel needs to be vindicated here, because he is the one.
Hashtag vindicated. Yeah.
Yes. Throughout this whole saga, and it is a saga, he has been the one trying to hold it together. And yeah, he had the spat with Rock. You have to bite back. You have to bark back. If you're a big dog, you bark back. But Vin Diesel was being maligned unfairly for just caring about something that he helped build and that he truly loves.
Yeah.
I mean, just talking about Dwayne The Rock Johnson here, Black Adam was a debacle and it was a bomb. And I said that on this very show for weeks and weeks and weeks. Everyone knows that. And he, I think, took a hit in his persona from that big power play that he tried to pull at DC. And there's a lot of fans of the pro wrestling genre that are feeling that same way about him now. He's doing a similar thing. I mean, Scott Mendelson, do you think that Dwayne The Rock Johnson is taking a hit to the point where is this post Governor Arnold Schwarzenegger in terms of he's starting to get looked at as a joke when it comes to a movie actor? And can he get that back? Because I mean, right now he's in a bad publicity cycle if you follow these things.
Because I mean, frankly, and to be fair, he was doing fine up until COVID. So we all had adverse reactions. But I think it's not really my place to give him advice. He's got more money than God.
No, go for it. Scott Mendelson gives advice to Dwayne The Rock Johnson.
Movies where other people around him make him look good. Where it's not just him coming onto the scene and saying, I'm the biggest, baddest motherfucker in the universe. And that's the pitch.
Right.
That's what I love about the Jumanji franchise. He plays an underdog in those films. He plays a comic riff on his persona, and everyone around him is also allowed to be wonderful.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, I think for Clayton and I, those are just our, we're not critics, huh? But those are our favorite of
Huh.
his films. I think his first Jumanji movie might be his quote unquote best movie. And I think the trouble that he's in right now is I don't think he's cool anymore. And I think he's sort of losing that, well, we all love this guy. He should run for president. I think that is, and you know what? When you get to the point when people say you should run for president, you should take stock of yourself in general. And I don't think he did that. I think he went the other way.
There were
He's in a
always
tough
signs
spot.
of that because he tried to sell the idea that Baywatch was for the fans. I
Mhm.
saw that at a fan screening. They laughed 10% more than I did.
Mhm.
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 And that was a classic example of a film that, like, I'm going to come in and be the biggest, baddest, motherfucker on the planet, and I'm going to be so funny and all, and nobody cared
No one cares.
because it was done in a way that made everyone else around him smaller.
Yeah. It's good. It's going to be an interesting thing to see. Obviously, he's got streaming to sort of protect himself. His next thing is the
Assuming the
red
studios want
one.
to work with him.
Assuming studio, yeah. Is that, we're not the Streamo boys, huh? But
Huh.
is that sort of a genre that these streaming companies are going to get out of, paying $200 million?
Yes.
Yes. Okay. Talk on that, Scott. Do
I
you
think
think those
even for
days are
Netflix,
over?
I think Rebel Moon is the last one.
Wow.
It's for Netflix. And that's not
Yeah.
because, it's terrible or whatever. I mean, it wasn't very
Right.
good, but
Right.
ironically, I think, as loath as I am to defend Zack Snyder because I know he hates me, when you compare Army of the Dead
Mm-hmm.
and Rebel Moon, to me, that's an example of this is a streaming film, but it was not run through the streaming meat grinder. But Rebel Moon feels like a streaming movie.
Okay. But it costs as much as a movie that would have opened in the middle of July cost. Yeah.
But yeah, I mean, it's they're realizing that there's no value in this stuff, and I've been saying that for 4 years. When you have a film like The Gray Man that costs $200 million that no one particularly loves, that is not going to spawn a giant franchise,
Mm-hmm.
and it only gets 27% more viewership over the first month than Purple Hearts, a movie that cost $3 million.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. If you're not bringing in box office, it really does become, what is the point of spending that much on a streaming only movie? And
Yeah.
if that starts to be the case and streaming companies are not making that type of movie, and the studios who release things theatrical look at Black Adam and they look at The Rock's sort of waning popularity, then it does become, what is The Rock's movie career?
Well, I think he certainly has more than enough money
Right.
to do a few projects where he's not the only reason it exists.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, the cliches say, beg Tarantino for a supporting role or whatever. But, that you do that route. You make movies where you being in them is interesting because you're working with directors who are not going to let you push them around.
Right.
Yeah, The Rock started out that way, obviously.
Yeah.
I mean, he did a few interesting roles here and there, and then he got scared when they bombed. And so then it's just been middle of the road, and then franchise Viagra, quote unquote.
Right.
And
Was
so
that ever
he's,
true?
I mean,
G.I. Joe, Rise of Cobra, or Retaliation was basically the end of that franchise. It made less domestic than Rise of Cobra did.
Yeah.
It made more overseas, but that was mostly because of 3D.
Mm-hmm. And I think you can look at the Fast and Furious franchise, starting with 5, bringing in an excellent director, and really being the reason that was a revitalized franchise.
Justin Lin directed 3, 4, and 5, and then 6.
Yes.
I do believe he boosted Fast and Furious.
Yeah.
But he couldn't leave well enough alone.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
And again, simplistically speaking, I think sometime around 2017, 2018, he started to believe his own hype.
Yes. And I just looked and reminded myself, his next project that he signed on for, like, I don't know if this will actually happen, but he's doing a movie with Benny Safdie. He's doing a movie with one of the Safdie brothers, unfortunately not both of them, because one of them wants to be an actor, but he's doing him. Rock is doing a small drama. He's playing an ex-MMA fighter. This is going to be the test, because there's a world in which he knocks us out of the park and people look at him and know that he can be in a Tarantino movie. He can act. And there's a world in which this is a disaster, and then him as an actor is not viable.
Well, 15 close to 20 years ago, he was often the best thing in bad or not that great movies, like Get Smart or Be Cool or Walking Tall. Rundown's great, but whatever. And then, to be fair, it was clear that he was trying to do stuff that challenged him. Nobody shows up. And then he starts doing all quadrant PG-13 action adventure fantasy films, and he becomes a giant movie star. Of course he's going to keep doing those.
Right.
And to be fair too, here's the thing. His competition as a wrestler turned actor is way there's a lot more talented actors now that are. You look at Batista, who we both agree is going to be an Oscar nominee at the very least at some point in the future.
Yes.
You see John Cena, who is hilarious. You bring him in that Ricky Stenicki trailer. God, I wish that was going theatrically, but hilarious. He's hilarious in that. He is a guy who also you can put in small roles and he can be really fun. So the competition here is no longer Hulk Hogan doing, the nanny movie. Yeah, Mr. Nanny and things like that. So the game has been elevated and he needs to rise to that occasion.
Yeah, we're going to see. So Scott, you mentioned The Gray Man when you were referencing these Netflix movies, and it did make me think one of the stars of that movie, Ryan Gosling, he had the biggest movie of the year last year. He was the second lead in Barbie. He's got this Fall Guy movie coming out to basically kind of open the summer, right? It's the first week in May movie.
Yeah, it's the first time since 2006 that a Marvel movie of some kind has not opened the summer.
Wow. And so instead of a Marvel movie, instead of a superhero movie, it is a movie based on a 80s action show that probably ran like 2 or 3 seasons. This is not the A-Team.
This is like The Equalizer, where if people show up, it'll be because of the stars and the high concept, because it looks fun.
Right. The amount of people who will go see this because they've been waiting for the movie adaptation of The Fall Guy, that's a scary group, honestly. I don't want to run into that person who's like, I haven't seen a movie in 30 years because I've been waiting for them to make a movie out of The Fall Guy.
That's what I like to call. I like to call that a new to you adaptation.
Yes,
which means it's not original, but most people going it'll be original to them.
Yes. So long range out, 2 months out. Where are you feeling on this? Because we've seen the trailer. It's directed by the director of the Deadpool movies. It's sort of got some of that Deadpool humor in the trailer, though. I don't know if it's going to truly feel full on Deadpool, fourth wall breaking.
Universal
that kind of thing.
Clearly believes in it because they're debuting it at South by Southwest. They're showing it at CinemaCon. They're apparently hiring David Leitch to direct Jurassic World 4. You don't do that if if you don't like the movie he just made for you. I think the first trailer is terrible. I think the CinemaCon sizzle reel was pretty good, but for whatever weird reason, the trailer they cut was weirdly confusing and
so
tonally awkward, and using a 50-year-old Bon Jovi song that barely has anything to do with the movie you're selling.
Right.
So again, if you want to appeal to the kids, use a song that's from this millennium.
Right. Yeah, Ryan Gosling's just coming off the biggest movie of the year, where the music in the movie is Dua Lipa and Billie Eilish and, artists that matter to younger people. This is, to me, a big test for Ryan Gosling because he's been a famous person for a long time. He's been a great actor for a long time. He's been an internet favorite for a long time. But other than La La Land until Barbie, he wasn't the lead in a hit. And
to be fair, spending $160 million on Blade Runner 2049 was a world-class stupid idea, and I said that way before the movie came out. But a 2.5 hour R-rated action light sci-fi film with just Harrison Ford and just Ryan Gosling opening to 33 million. Not bad.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Yeah, people definitely like him.
Yeah, they showed up. It just cost me too much.
So yeah, I mean, do you think this movie could cement him as a modern day, obviously this is not 90s Tom Cruise, 90s Will Smith, but a modern day version of a butts in the seats movie star? Like what is, a couple of months out, the best case scenario for a Fall Guy opening the first Friday in May?
Honestly, I think a best case scenario, ironically, is, over under, give or take, Blade Runner 2049.
Okay.
Which did 95 domestic and I think like 260 worldwide.
Okay.
And again, this could do closer to Bullet Train, which did like 100 and change and like 270, 280 worldwide, give or take.
Mm-hmm.
And if it gets over 300, yippee skippy.
Right.
And I assume it's budgeted at that level where it doesn't need to make $1 gajillion.
Mm-hmm.
This is Universal.
Mm-hmm.
And it's got, in terms of the 5 necessary ingredients for a non-franchise adult screen breakout, you've got an ensemble cast, kinda. You got the 2 of them, plus Aaron Taylor Johnson, maybe a couple other people that escaped my mind.
Mm-hmm.
You've got a marquee director, the guy that directed Deadpool 2 and John Wick 1 and Atomic Blonde and Bullet Train.
Mm-hmm.
You have the promise of cinematic escapism.
Mm-hmm.
It does not look like a dour exercise in cinematic suffering. The issue is they need to have a much more specific marketing hook on what the hell is this movie about.
Yes.
No.
Because the hook of the TV show is that he was a stuntman who solved mysteries, or who helped people in need.
He solved mysteries. He was like a bounty hunter and stuff. I mean, that's
like your classic 80s A-Team. Every week someone in need is like, hey, could you help us, Fall Guy? Could you help us, the Hulk? Could you help us, the A-Team?
Yeah.
And this trailer really doesn't seem to do much, and maybe the movie doesn't either, but doesn't seem to do much with, this is a stunt man, which feels like, I don't know how much of a hook that is, but that's definitely the main characteristic of the lead.
I think from what I gather, the movie is about a stuntman who is reluctantly recruited by his ex-wife, who's the director on an action movie, to track down the lead actor who has vanished.
And it becomes a violent mystery and all that. Yeah, and there is a scene in the trailer where he is going to make a jump and then he's like, no, this is crazy. And then he has to make the jump. I do trust that this movie is going to be fun. I think it's the perfect sort of thing to remake because it was not high art. It's something that had a fun concept that you could make into an hour and 40 or 50 minute movie and, pick some of the best parts of what happened in the show. And you also don't have hardcore fans of the Fall Guy that are going to be saying, he would never do that.
Right. This is not saying Elsewhere, for instance.
Yeah. It's got ruined my childhood.
Exactly.
Yep. Again.
It's got one of the greatest theme songs, this country theme song. Look up the Fall Guy theme song. It's amazing. They should have Zach Bryan cover this thing as that's what it should be, the theme for this, right? If you want to get the kids in there, get Zach Bryan doing this. And I do think that this has a chance to be a big breakout, and it's a great look for the future of movies, that this is something that is leading the summer, because Bullet Train was August and this is not August, and that bodes well.
And I think it's very encouraging. 2 out of the first 3 weeks of the summer, you have a high concept, new to you, or the case of If, outright original, star-driven movie.
Mm-hmm. So that's in May. I just want to get some quick hits for you because, it's been a rough January. Mean Girls, the biggest movie of the month. Beekeeper, great film. We loved it. But when those are the biggest movies of your month, it's a light release schedule. In February, we're just waiting on Madam Web and Bob Marley to save us. So that's a rough month. But March looks like a summer month, in some ways.
And there's plenty of years where January, February was a little light.
Right.
And then it kicks into gear in March. 2019, for example, Upside overperformed, Glass underperformed, Lego Movie 2 outright bombed, everybody was waiting for How to Train Your Dragon and Captain Marvel.
Mm-hmm. Right. So I mean, it's traditionally it has been that, January you go see the Oscar movies that you haven't seen,
And
and the
that's what's
December
missing is we don't
holdovers.
have the Oscar season anymore.
Right. Right. Poor Things is not
La La
banking.
Land.
Exactly. Yes. Yes. So right now, Barbie and Oppenheimer were the only hits, and they came out in July, and none of the other Best Picture noms really mean anything at the box office. But looking ahead to March, March kind of looks like a bigger summer month than June, for instance, coming up.
This is a really bad summer.
It is a
There's
really
no other
bad.
way about it. You look at it month by month, and
Yeah.
not only is it a light schedule with maybe one tentpole a week, but in many weeks that tentpole is a coin toss.
Yeah. I mean, looking ahead to June, since you bring it up, Inside Out 2 is the only movie on that currently on that release schedule, other than I'm going to throw this out there, Colleen Hoover's It Ends With Us. I think that's going to be a surprise giant hit this year.
But that's not going to replace a big tentpole.
It's not going to replace the big tentpole. It's a Sound of Freedom situation.
Yes.
But Inside Out 2 is the only thing that could make worldwide 500 million coming out in June. There's nothing else.
Maybe Bad Boys 4, but that's
what are you hearing on that?
I've heard nothing other than it exists, and they were going to open it earlier this year, but they moved it to summer because it's a summer movie.
Wait, so it exists. It is shot.
Yes.
Okay. Because I do see, I'm looking at using the numbers right now as the release schedule, and it does have Untitled Bad Boys movie for June 14th. So, and it's coming out the same weekend as Inside Out 2, which is madness considering nothing else comes out.
But unfortunately, back in the old days, you would have an adult skewing, or all quadrant but violent action comedy / action movie like Wanted or Central Intelligence or World War Z that would kick ass right alongside the Pixar movie.
Right. That's true. I mean, go for it, Clayton. I know you've got some reservations.
I think this thing is going to bomb. Bad Boys 4. I think Will Smith, the loss of star power, I don't think I've ever seen that in my lifetime of somebody just losing all respect and all love so quickly and in such an insane way. I will not see this movie. I know there's a lot of people who have no interest in seeing this movie. I'm like, would you release this in a theater? I mean, I feel like you dump this somewhere. I just cannot imagine that people are going to rush out and see a Bad Boys 4 with Will Smith starring in this. I just don't see it. I don't see it.
I mean, if that's the case, man, then June is going to be in rough shape because they kind of need this to be a hit.
Well, I mean, I assume they ran the numbers before they greenlit the thing.
Mm-hmm.
It was barely in pre-production, before the slap.
Right.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I'm of the opinion that most people won't care. It might not make them more want to see the film, but it's not going to make them like, if it looks good, if the reviews are good, if it's something that absent that controversy, I would be interested in, then they will still show up.
I think there's plenty of post-slap things, and we're not going to get into it because we're not a muckraking show. We talk about box office, but I will say that there's a lot more that has come out after the controversy that could dim someone's stardom. And so I just think this thing is going to absolutely tank. Now, Pat, can I mention another movie that I think possibly, and a big star just mentioned maybe is not coming out or is never going to get off the ground, is this Thunderbolts movie. Florence Pugh saying this movie might not even happen. You have Stephen Yeun escaping the clutches of Marvel. Good for him. Great man. You have Ayo Edebiri, who also stepped away from Thunderbolts due to scheduling. They are hemorrhaging talent. Florence Pugh probably trying to escape, probably contracted. And so she does not want this movie to happen. I'm not going to speak for her, but I am speaking for her. There's no benefit for her for this movie to happen unless she doesn't get paid unless it happens. Now, if she's getting paid, even if it doesn't happen, this movie should not happen. Because, right? Do you think this movie comes out
Oh, 50-50 at this point.
Okay.
Wow.
And I think safe in the knowledge that it might not come out or it might at least get delayed again. As soon as I heard that Jurassic World 4 was A, happening, and B, opening July 2nd, my first thought was, and I read about this yesterday, Superman Legacy needs to get the fuck away from it.
Yes.
It's opening 10 days later. No, run. Open before, open after. I don't care, but give yourself some space. Even if it's just opening on the July 18th slot that Warner Brothers and Chris Nolan loves.
Right.
Wow.
Well, so I mean, tell us why you think that. Why do you think Dinosaur is more powerful than Superman?
Because it is the most consistent tentpole franchise in the modern era. The 3 Jurassic movies, the world movies, have averaged $1.3 billion worldwide over 3 movies.
Wow.
On an average budget of 150 plus 170 plus 180, average of 160, give or take.
Right.
These are the biggest bargains in Hollywood. And it's one of those franchises that the internet swears everybody hates them, but in the real world, they like them.
Yeah.
They've all been pretty leggy after massive opening weekends with decent word of mouth. And even if people really didn't like Dominion because it had too many locusts and too much nostalgia, oh no, it only does $750 on a $150 budget. What will we do?
Right.
But think about childhood kids. What is a consistent thing that they like that has really not changed for a long time? Superheroes'
People
fortunes
being
have gone
eaten by dinosaurs.
Yes.
Superheroes have
love
gone
dinosaurs.
up and down through all of our lifetimes with kids liking them, not liking them, thinking they're lame, whatever. Dinosaurs have consistently always been cool and interesting to kids.
Yeah.
And I think that is something that is not being talked about, is that, like you said, their consistency. Yeah, you just talked about it very eloquently. And that's why this is the kind of stuff you get on the Substack, and that's why you got to pay for it.
Yeah. You got to pay for
for
it.
years I've been saying this, just because, and other people too. It's like, what's weird is because very few, if really no franchises have ever really made a serious effort to jump on the dinosaur bandwagon, it really is the only game in town. It provides IMAX friendly, colorful, pulpy blockbuster spectacle filled with blue-collar protagonists. Nobody's a superhero. Nobody's a chosen one. Nobody's a one-man army. They're scientists, soldiers, paleontologists, business tycoons turned activists, etc., who are ordinary people in extraordinary circumstances. And people get eaten by dinosaurs.
Yeah. And the leads are refillable.
Yes. And yes, I do think that Chris Pratt was a bigger deal in why Jurassic World and the sequels took off. Again, don't listen to the internet. Your kids think Chris Pratt is nifty.
Mm-hmm.
So they do have to find somebody that's going to fill that void.
Yeah.
Glenn Powell. Let's see how Twisters does.
I don't know about a lead role, but you absolutely need to get on the phone with Jack Black and give him a major supporting role in this movie.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. I do wonder, though, will he want to work with dinosaurs after whatever his experience was working with King Kong?
That is fair.
Yeah. But then he did go, he was welcomed back into the jungle in the Jumanji movie. So I think that's a great one. I mean, listen, Jack Black, just one of the most unsung, sure thing kid stars that we have.
Yes,
I mean, he
is kids film. He is an asses and seats movie star.
Yes.
The Kung Fu Panda 4 coming out.
That's what. Yeah, it's gonna be huge, and that's why.
Yeah,
because that's a marquee character played by an actor that kids like.
Mm-hmm.
Scott, how big could Dune 2 be?
I mean, it could be huge. Here's my thing.
Okay.
I genuinely believe that Dune, the first Dune, made about as much in 2021 as it otherwise would have made in non-COVID times without HBO Max and all that silliness.
Okay.
At the end of the day, Godzilla v. Kong made $470 million, despite being on HBO Max. The Conjuring, The Devil Made Me Do It, made $300 million, despite being on HBO Max.
Mm-hmm.
And there was all this anecdotal evidence in 2021. Oh no, the Suicide Squad bombed because it was on HBO Max. Okay, then why did Free Guy make $330 million opening the next weekend?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Ready on the Last Dragon bomb because of the premiere access. Okay, Paw Patrol made the exact same amount of money being on Paramount Plus.
Right. Right.
There was a slew of movies in 2021 that did as well as, if not better, than what they would have been expected to do in non-COVID times.
Mm-hmm.
Free Guy, Godzilla v Kong, I would argue Dune, Spider-Man No Way Home, which would have been a massive hit, but it wouldn't have done Titanic numbers opening as just another tentpole in July 2021.
Right.
Yeah.
There was a lot of pent up.
Yeah.
We need to see something, and those were the big movies of that sparse year.
Yeah, and
Now,
even in October, No Time to Die did 775, 155 worldwide. Venom did 200 million domestic, 500 worldwide. Halloween Kills, despite being on Peacock, opened with $49 million and legged out to 131. And you could say, oh, that was less than Halloween. Yeah, because audiences didn't like Halloween as much as critics did.
Mm-hmm.
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 They didn't care about it's about generational trauma. It's so deep, empowering. It's a Me Too slasher film. None of that resonated with them. It was just, it's a Halloween film.
Could Dune 2, it's coming out in March. It was supposed to come out in November of this year. And I think that would have been a fascinating, just as Oscar watchers, it would have been a fascinating situation had Dune come out in November, because I think it would have been right in the middle of this Oscar race. But it's coming out in March. Could it get some of the post Oppenheimer? If the reviews are just out of control, the reviews are, this is going to be a best picture contender, Villeneuve's going to be the favorite for best director. Could this get that Oppenheimer glow of great movie, big name director? This is the one adults have to see. Plus, it's got sandworms and it's got Chalamet for the young people. Like, could it get to that level?
Absolutely possible. It's got a stacked ensemble cast of people that are added value elements. Chalamet, Florence Pugh, Christopher Walken, Rebecca Ferguson, etc., etc. Austin Butler, Josh Brolin. I think he survived the first one. Yeah. So these are all people that will help. And yeah, I think it gets a slight Wonka bump.
Yeah.
Yeah. So
what concerns me is the notion that absent COVID and absent HBO Max, that Dune was going to pull Lord of the Rings numbers. And surely this film is going to play like a Lord of the Rings film without those variables. And I'm saying maybe, but the film did 400 million domestic, 110 world. I'm sorry, it did 110 domestic on par with The Flash. It did 400 million worldwide on par with Eternals. And the question is, how much of a bump is it going to get from being the part 2 to a well-liked part 1? Because generally speaking, they do get a bump. Deathly Hallows, Endgame, Hunger Game, or Twilight Breaking Dawn part 2, etc., etc. And so, I mean, if you say, it lost 30% because of HBO Max, okay, awesome. Then you say, it's going to get another 30% because it's a breakout sequel to a part 1 that people liked. Okay, fine, awesome. That still gets you under 700 million worldwide. And that might be best case scenario. And that's great.
Right.
They would be thrilled if this does Wonka money.
Yeah.
But the idea that $1 billion worldwide has become sort of a generic catch-all for this film is going to do well, that is stupid. And
especially
that's an ongoing problem. Yes.
Yeah. I mean, without China the way it was, 5-10 years ago, the $1 billion thing has to be retired as a barometer. Yeah.
Now, can I give you my pitch for why I think this is going to be massive?
Okay.
Sure.
And I think, and you invoke Titanic. Obviously, we're not talking Titanic in the way of box office, but we're talking about this trailer for Dune 2 that I've been seeing really keys in on Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet in a romance. These are two big stars. I mean, Chalamet is in a real life romance right now. Zendaya is also, I believe, in a real life romance with an actor, Spider-Man. I think that's still going on. I believe it is, right?
As far as I know.
Yeah.
I think so.
we would have found out if it wasn't.
Absolutely. So yes, PR would have been in
and
motion
frankly,
there.
If for some reason they have broken up, I imagine they're under a vow of silence until after the movie comes out.
Absolutely. I totally agree with that. So I think that this, yes, everything you mentioned before, well-liked first movie. It's the second part, it'll get a bump. I do think that Wonka bump, the fact that this is, at least with the trailer, romantic centric. It feels like star-crossed lovers situation. Young people love both of these people. To see them together, because in the first movie they were not together. In this, she was more teased than in this movie, and she is huge. And I think that is going to be the thing that puts this movie over. Now, will it be $1 billion baby? I don't know. But I do think it is going to do stellar business because of these factors.
I agree with you. And the third trailer is awesome.
Yeah.
It's a terrific tentpole trailer that, yes, it invokes, person on the side of the persecution changes sides because he falls in love. That's Avatar.
Yeah.
And I think if you remember, the second trailer for the first Dune was trying to sell it as Avatar, even though she's barely in the movie, which, fine, whatever. No, I'm not saying it's going to flop or anything stupid like that. I'm just saying if it gets to Wonka, they'll be happy. If it gets to the Batman, they'll be thrilled.
All right, Scott, we know your time is limited and it's valuable. And so I think we're going to wind down here. Clayton, is there anything else that we haven't touched on that you want to throw by the head of the table, Scott Mendelson?
No, I mean, I think we did talk about a lot of things, and I mean, obviously, we're going to have you back before this big March, I hope, so we can talk to you about that. And obviously, summer's coming up, so I think we covered a good amount of things, and I appreciate you taking the time as always.
Oh, absolutely.
All right, so Scott, tell everyone again, where can they find you, and also congratulations because you are in the podcasting game. I heard the first episode, Scott Mendelson Has a Podcast, was the title of the first episode. Tell us about where the wanna be old boys, wanna be old girls, wanna be old people can find your podcast.
Right now, just go to Substack and find it. And it's called The Outside Scoop, the box office podcast, because whatever.
Right.
And what I want to do is I want it to be more than just me pontificating for 45 minutes. So I decided there are people that I read. They're not podcasters like you necessarily, but they are, they're box office writers that I have known and respected for years. And I thought, how about I just get the three of them on, and there may be more because there's a few other people I know here and there. And I sort of step back to the best of my ability and let them talk about it.
Okay.
And
okay.
So far, yeah. I mean, when I was doing editing, most of the stuff I cut out was me. So I think it's successful in that sense.
All right. I mean, it is a must listen. I mean, obviously the Outside Scoop is a must pay for, and you get the podcast. And very exciting. Got a bunch of ink stained box office scribes getting behind the mics. I love it.
And I do want, after this is over, I'd love to have some pointers and tips on the ways that the first episode was terrible and how I can make it better.
We will give you that. So that is that's on the behind the scenes there. That's not for the audience. Awesome. Well, Scott, thank you for joining us. Of course, everyone email us, theboboyspodcast@gmail.com. Follow us on our socials at theboboyspod. Wannabe senior intern Christopher and Wannabe junior intern Scott. You got to get some interns. This intern, I mean, they'll change your life.
Yeah.
So thank you.
I'll know that I'm successful when I gotta hire people.
You know what? We'll give you some tips on that too, Scott.
Yeah.
We'll talk off mic, but thank you, Jack, for the Substack, which Scott, talk about a must read. The BO Boys Substack is back. Our junior intern, Jack, he is. I mean, listen, this is the generation that you birth. Wannabe junior intern Jack is a disciple of Scott Mendelson. He's writing twice a week on the BO Boys Substack, his previews, his reviews. He's doing movies that meant something to his box office life. So everyone check that out, the BO Boys Substack, and 5 stars on Apple Podcasts. And of course, pay for, because you owe this man a living.
Yes.
Pay for the Outside Scoop by Scott Mendelson on Substack. And Clayton, I think that's it. I think we've done it.
I can't think of anything else left to say.
No, nothing at all.
Except for, until next time, we'll smell you
at the